Welcome to episode 8 of Eternal Horizons, a Magic the Gathering podcast where we look out on the legacy format and beyond. My name is Jasper Murison-Bowie, or just Jasper, and I'm here with my good friend Francis Cooper, aka FGC. How's it going, Francis?
I'm good, thanks. I've just got back from a few days away, some of which was fun, playing Magic, which we're going to talk about, some of which was work-related. But yeah, now I'm back home, and I've been jamming a few leagues and prepping for an event this weekend. So that's me.
Sweet. Sounds great. Last time around, we had Callum Smith on the show to talk about Goblin Welder, which was a lot of fun. And we've both been playing that deck a bunch since, including, as you mentioned, a European Legacy Masters qualifier that we'll be talking about in a bit. We've had some nice comments and questions, and you've been tinkering with Tezzeret in the list. So that's all going to come up because there's also been a banned and restricted announcement. So we might touch on the state of Legacy in general. But first, a change of pace. You mentioned tournament coming up this weekend, and that is that you are playing in the 25th edition of Circle of Protection Con, more commonly referred to as COPCon, and it's a charity old school tournament. Can you tell our listeners a bit about the old school format, what deck you might play, etc.?
Yeah, I suppose for those in the know, this is organized by the Brothers of Fire. I think they call themselves, which is like a pseudo biker gang. Well, it's sort of an overlap of biker gang culture with old school player culture, with lots of jackets with patches sewn on from events they've gone to and things like that, which is a bit of a tangent.
It's very fun, though.
It is very fun. I guess I've been attending old school events sporadically since 2018, primarily just in London, where we play a variant on Swedish rules. So I think those are the original rules for old school, in which, let's think about this. So you can play with ABU, so Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, and then you can play with the so-called Four Horsemen sets. So Antiquities, The Dark, Legends, and Arabian Nights.
Okay.
Those are the sets legal in this format. And that probably tells you quite a lot already about what may or may not be good. In, I believe, the US, they have two old school formats. One is Eternal Central and one I think is called Atlantic. And I believe they both allow differing numbers of restricted cards to what we play with mostly in Europe, and also allow Fallen Empires, I believe, is the set that they can play with. So you can play with Hymn to Torak, which is quite a good addition. I think there's also like a black aggressive deck that you can play with basically because of that.
Which is the version of the format where you get to play with 4 copies of Strip Mine?
Those are the American versions. Yes. Brian Weissman, who...
That sounds fun.
Yeah, is a big proponent of playing with 4 Strip Mine because the single library means that you lose sometimes to somebody having library in their opening hand. And so the only answer is Strip
Library
Mine.
of Alexandria. Yeah, okay.
Which I don't think is true. That's, I think, pretty contestable. There are lots of ways to be a library. I
love the way that old school, like the way that you started this explanation was that like we play a variant on Swedish rules, which makes it sound like some kind of underground like fight club where you're not, it's bladed weapons, but only on Tuesdays. It's kind of like quite arcane and quite amusing. And I like that about old school. It's very, let's say, iconoclastic.
Yeah, I'd say it's certainly the most esoteric Magic format. There are just sort of like things that you wouldn't think about that are very relevant to the discussion. You can't just show up. You need to know all of the individual elements of the agreement, as you're saying.
It's kind of a word of mouth format in that sense, right? Like you need like a bit of an in, and you need someone that will explain like, okay, this is the variant. You can't, no revised, whatever, like, which isn't obvious if you're just thinking about a format that predates pre-modern in the sets of times that are allowed. So it's like everything up to the start of pre-modern is old school in my mind as a like conceptual space, but obviously that's not quite true.
I'm trying to work it out. So I think pre-modern is 4th edition, so revised gets left out, and as does I'm trying to think what is in, I don't think Hymn to Torak's legal in 4th edition, is in pre-modern rather.
No, because it's in Fallen Empires, so that's So yeah, I guess if Swedish rules. Anyway, we're getting lost in the weeds already.
But you did mention revised, so that sort of brings me on to reprint policy. Swedish, in the most strict terms, only allowed printings of the cards from those sets.
Yeah,
which is horrifically expensive. Thankfully, in most places outside of Sweden, you can play with what's termed the Ravenna reprint policy, which we also play with in Britain, where you can play with any old border printing of the cards legal, which is still an unreasonably expensive Magic the Gathering format. I'm not saying otherwise, but it's significantly cheaper than you could play with your revised dual lands, for example.
Gosh.
Things like that.
How affordable.
Yeah, but you can also play with, I don't know, 6th edition Recall or
right, yeah.
like 4th edition Sarah Angel, right? Instead of buying really old copies that are quite a lot more expensive. So yeah, that's, I guess, a broad introduction to the things you might think about. So there are, I guess, 3 different ban lists, but ban and restricted lists, because it does have a restricted list you can play with power and that sort of thing as well. So that's what I'm going to this weekend. So it's Swedish with Ravenna reprints. It's a 25th version of COPCon, and it'll be pretty chill. There's no actual prizes outside of like signed cards for the person who's been, like the best sport, the spirit of the event. And then there's a card, I guess, entertainingly, Spirit of Circle Protection Con comes from, if you win, you get a Circular Protection artifact, I believe, I've never won, which you have to put in your sideboard for all remaining events of the series you join. And if you win more than one, you have to play multiple copies.
It's cumulative. It's a cumulative nerf to you winning further events, which is amusing. I don't know how good Circular Protection Artifacts is in the format. I mean, we've talked about some of the granular aspects of format design, but what's the general vibe of the format for the uninitiated? How would you describe old school gameplay and the community and so on?
Let's start with the gameplay. So the gameplay, I would say, is on average quite slow. So the threats you're talking about playing in decks that do play creatures are things, the best creatures in the format might be things like Serendib Freet, which is a 3-mana 3/4 flyer in blue, that deals damage to you every upkeep, or Sarah Angel, a 5-mana 4/4 flyer, or Savannah Lions, a 1-mana 2/1. Yeah. And Savannah Lions might be like the most aggressive creature in the format on rate. I guess you can play with Ball Lightning, which is in the dark, but these are the sorts of creatures you're talking about playing with. There are very, very few decks that can like realistically win super early without a crazy draw. And I guess that's where I say that the format's quite slow on average, but if you're playing against a deck that has all the power in it, right? All 5 Moxen, Black Lotus, Soul Ring, Time Walk, Ancestral Recall, which is a lot of the decks that are competitive are going to be playing all of these cards. Sometimes your opponent will just draw a hand and you can't really beat them. So they'll just Mind Twist you on turn 1 for 6 or something, and the game is just over.
It's funny that you say they'll just Mind Twist you for 6 on turn 1, because in the 2 lifetime games of Old School that I've ever played, I'm pretty sure that happened both games against our mutual friend Carl. I was playing your Field of Dreams deck, I think, and I just got absolutely wrecked by Mind Twist off Black Lotus. And that was my Old School experience. But I think from what I gather, and from having looked at lists and stuff, mostly the games are not like that. It's mostly a bit more similar, I guess, to pre-modern, but even clunkier and even less efficient and even more grindy and sort of incremental.
Yeah, I think it's like most games are similar to pre-modern in that they're very grindy, but you will have a few key cards in your deck that are really broken because of the restricted list. Like you might just draw Wheel of Fortune, or you might draw Time Twister, or you might draw Ancestral Recall. You might have an opening hand with Library of Alexandria, which in such a slow format is often unbeatable. And that really changes the dynamic of the game, where what you're playing to drawing could change the whole game on its head. You could go from losing to winning. You could just draw balance and the game just flips. So it does have some different dynamics in it, which
for sure
make it quite charming to play. And I think taking it seriously is like you're not going to get anywhere with that because
a fool's errand.
Yeah, exactly. But it is very charming. I think generally the agreed best strategy is to play the deck, which is, for those who don't know, like a base blue-white, but often 5-color control deck, which plays all of the power and often doesn't play any creatures in the main deck. Sometimes will play Sarah Angel or something similar, or put them in the sideboard, and wins with 4 Mishra's Factory often, and like Fireball your opponent, or Regrowth your Fireball, or Brain Geezer your opponent after casting Mana Drain, these sorts of things.
This is a cool thing about Old School because the deck is a deck that goes right back. It's not like this is like a modern invention. And the history in Old School is very present, obviously by nature of the design of the format and the sets that are allowed. But I think also in terms of the people that play it, it tends to be people that were around then and have this memory of what Magic used to be like, and the format seeks to recreate that in some way. And I think the kind of restricted list kind of adds to that because it has that swingy kind of kitchen table-y feel like that you just described, where like you're not storming off in the way that you would with a vintage deck with power in it. You're not killing your opponent straight away with your Black Lotus, but you're using it to cast these other cards. And so, yeah, as you said, there are broken combinations. Mind Twisting for 6 will win a game of Magic in 2026 in the same way that it did in 1996. But I think the general vibe is a bit more relaxed and casual because the format lends itself to that. It's odd to talk about a casual format where the decks can be worth 6 figures, but still I think the feeling is one of like community and camaraderie within that space of people that are enjoying the former Magic experience.
I will add that there are combo decks in the format, but they don't operate in the same sorts of ways as you might be used to from, say, Legacy or Vintage. I think the one that comes to mind, we have a friend who will play Twiddle Vault, which is literally playing copies of Twiddle, and you can play up to 4 copies of Time Vault in this format.
Seems reasonable. And
you're like playing 4 Twiddle, I think.
There's no key, right? Vault. So it's fine. It's a fair card.
So you're sort of able to take you can take a non-deterministic number of turns because you have 4 copies of Recall in your deck, which is a card that lets you exchange cards from your hand with the ones in your graveyard. So once you've twiddled your Time Vault several times, you will then recall back your twiddles and then do it again. That's a combo deck, and that will eventually win by making a load of mana and casting Brain Geezer or Fireball. So that's one point. The other point is you talked about how the people are who play it. People who play it often have a very different mindset to the people who will play modern Magic formats. Often they will be older, although I wasn't around in 1993. I only appeared a year after that, so I can't claim to have been playing then. But most people who are there have been playing significantly longer than I have. And they all have their certain perspectives on what modern Magic formats are like. And they'll have certain strong opinions on things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles being in Magic. I mean, I'd be surprised if most of them knew that was even a thing, but that sort of thing. So it's much more of just like, it really is like almost without fail, these events are held in venues where you can drink alcohol. And I will be shocked to see like anything other than like 4 pints of beer on a table with 4 decks open on them. Like that's like very normal. I often worry about children running around the pub knocking the table because that would be quite an expensive afternoon. But that's what I'm going for. It'll be a good time.
Yeah, I mean, it seems for all of the sort of amusement that we've had at its iconoclastic nature and the rule set and so on, I think I'm really glad that a format like it exists, and it's definitely on my broader Magic to-do list to give it a bit more of a go, either by borrowing a deck or by cobbling together some horrifically underpowered version of, like, I don't know, Blue Tempo or something without any of the good cards. But, I mean, could you sort of say what attracted you to it to begin with?
Sure. So I had started kind of buying some old cards because I liked them. with no real purpose. So I think I bought a library at GP Birmingham 2018, so earlier in the year before I started playing. And I think I bought an Ancestral from a legacy player in the UK. But I was just sort of buying them because one day maybe I'd play Vintage or something. And I didn't really there were no Vintage events to speak of, or at least they weren't then. And our mutual friend Ethan suggested that we go to these old school events that he'd heard about.
Yeah.
And I don't think he lived in London at the time. And we were playing like old school in practice rooms on Magic Online.
Sick.
Which was trying to make decks work without power, basically, or like one or two pieces. And it was really funny. So he was playing Goblins with like Goblin Balloon Brigade, Goblins of the Flag, and Goblin King to give all his Goblins +1/+1. And he was playing Fork to like copy your opponent's Ancestral Recall or Brain Geezer or something.
Yes. Love it.
And Wheel of Fortune and Ball Lightning, Honorary Goblin.
I mean, Ball Lightning is a terrifying threat in this format, surely.
It's crazy.
3 mana 6/1. Wow.
Yeah. It's not very good against Circle of Protection Red, though, we discovered.
Well.
I did quite a lot of copying Ethan's balls in our games in our flat. Anyway, we went along.
That's this episode flagged.
We had a great time, drinking beers and playing Magic. And actually, I remember showing up, and our other mutual friend Alex was there, but we didn't know he was going to be there, I think, from memory. So we just showed up and were like, we already have people. So yeah, that was lovely. I think I played blue-white tempo control stuff with, not much going on. So that's sort of the origin point. Ethan I don't know how he found out about it, but yeah, that's where it came from. And surprise, surprise, I'm still playing mostly blue-white tempo control stuff now.
Yeah, that feels like a nice moment to talk about what you'll probably be playing on Saturday, because your deck has grown in leaps and bounds in terms of what you've invested into it, not just financially, but I would say emotionally, artistically, as far as, what you've constructed. What are you going to play?
I will be playing the same list that I played at there was a teams event at the Hasselt tournament we went to last year, Eternal Mania. That was it. Which we managed to take down. We split the prizes in the final and won the deciding match. So
that was you and Alex and Ethan?
That was Pete White and Alex.
Pete White, Alex.
Pete was playing Vintage. Alex was playing Pre-Modern. I think we were playing like
Vintage, Pre-Modern, Old School is a hell of a team trio.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I'm glad it was Proxy. I don't know how many sets of power they expected people to have access to, but
oh god, yeah.
It was. We played Demir Frog. Alex played Green-White Enchantress, and I played like Blue-White Splashing Demonic Tutor and Mind Twist Serendipity Free Savannah Lions deck. Which is,
your
I
creature
think,
suite,
a staple.
Your creature suite is 4 Lions, 4 Ifrit, and 3 Serra Angel, which is not a curve.
But if you put a Mox in there, you can play your Ifrit on turn 2.
That's such a good point. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And often you can play Serendipity on turn 1 if you get lucky. So, it's mid-range tempo, blue-white, with, all the power except Time Twister, and then Demonic Tutor and Mind Twist. Demonic Tutor often just goes and gets Mind Twist or Ancestral Recall. And you're playing this hybrid beatdown control deck where you've got 4 Counterspell, a Mana Drain, 2 Power Sink, 4 Swords to Plowshares, but then some threats, that sort of thing. And then post board, I have sort of 2 options to either go lower to the ground, and I can bring in some Armageddons to sort of try and go under control decks, or I have like a Moat and some Maze of Iths and some Jayande Tomes, and I can cut the aggressive creatures and try and play the control deck. So there's sort of a matchup positioning question post board, which is fun.
That's cool. Is Jayande Tome, you've got 1 copy of it in here?
In the main deck, yes. To go and get with Demonic Tutor if I've already used my card advantage spells is why it's there.
Think I just bring that up because I think, again, it showcases the format quite nicely. JMD Tome, 4 mana artifact, pay 4 mana, again as an activated ability and tap it to draw 1 card. So a nice 8 mana investment to draw a single card, 12 mana to draw 2 across 2 turns. You know, I think that gives you some idea of, if you've never engaged with this format, what we're talking about here. And that's, again, I mean, like, you're playing 3 main deck disenchant, which, you know, is something that we know from, like, pre-modern Goblins often plays main deck naturalized. So obviously artifacts are something that is a core part of older Magic formats, or Magic formats which you play older cards. So I find that kind of interesting. But what have you done to this deck that makes it extra pretty? Oh,
sure. A few years ago, there was a chap locally who I believe is in the States right now, but maybe is coming back soon, called Nick Borman, who...
Very nice man.
Yeah, lovely chap. He basically started doing card alters, and so I think every card now, minus like power and duels, are altered by Nick in my deck, which is lovely. So it does somewhat lock in what I want to play quite a long time ahead of time, because otherwise I have to... Well, I can't at the moment because he lives in America, but I'd have to say, oh, can you alter this card or whatever?
Yeah. But it's a beautiful deck. I've seen pictures of it. I don't think I've ever seen it fully in person. I've seen some of the cards, but it looks absolutely gorgeous. So if you're going to COPCon, make sure you get your eyes on Francis's deck, because it's a work of art.
Thanks. I think part of why I also felt keen to do it is that basically every card in my deck is like a cheaper printing than what you might expect to see at these sorts of events. Like, you will turn up to this event and multiple people will have full beta decks, like all beta power and beta duels.
Oh boy. And
there are no fetch lands in this format, so you have to play like 4 of each duel and like this really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, I was there going, yeah, this deck's unreasonable, it has power in it, but compared to some other people there, yeah, so I wanted to do my thing to make my deck a little bit more interesting. And I like it. I'm very happy with it, the way it's come out, and Nick's done a great job, so yeah.
Cool. Well, I very much look forward to hearing how that event goes, and I hope that for the next COPCon you'll be registering 1 fewer sideboard card of your choice.
We'll see.
Should we talk a bit about the tournament that we've just played, that both of us played? Obviously, I'm not going to COPCon, don't have a deck, but one day I'll come along to a COPCon just for vibes. But yeah, I mean, we both just went to Derby the past weekend to play in the European Legacy Masters qualifier. After I think I talked a couple of episodes ago about going to Bath for one of those. And this time we both went and we played something like the same 70 out of 75 cards, probably, roughly. Our lists were very close because obviously we'd just been talking a bunch about it with Callum as well, and playing a bunch. And I think it's fair to say that the event didn't go to plan for either of us, in the sense that, I started 0-2. You started 2-0, but unfortunately then lost 2, and you finished 3-2. I finished 2-3. So not a standout event in terms of success, but we had a very nice time in Derby, and I think, broadly speaking, I felt very good about choice of deck, even though the results didn't bear that out. All the matches that I lost were pretty close, so it just is one of those things where, unfortunately, a 5-round tournament with 30 players, there's not a lot of room for error, not a lot of margin there to lose a round, because I think multiple top 8ers were like 3-0-2, so 3 wins and then just 2 intentional draws. And it's just, the tournament boundaries kind of make that a little bit awkward when you have so close to a threshold for 6 rounds, but not quite. What do you want to say about ELMQ? Do you want to talk about the meta? Do you want to talk about the deck? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I probably had quite a similar feeling after the event to you, in terms of, like, you know, awkwardness, and it's just the nature of a Magic event where you might not quite do as well as you wanted. I think both my losses were able to draw after the matches we played to make top 8 sort of thing.
Yeah.
So very close, but not quite there. Big shout out to Joe and the people at Manaforge Games in Derby, obviously, for running it. And I think they run monthly Legacy events there.
Midlands Legacy Monthly?
Yeah, would 100% recommend going to those if you are close to there. I suppose, yeah, we could talk through the list that we played, or the metagame. Let's go over the metagame. We've talked a lot about the sorts of lists, and they're probably pretty familiar at this point.
Yeah, I would say if you want to hear more about what we registered, it's going to be basically what we talked about in episode 7. So the links will be there. So check that out. But yeah, the meta was 30 players, and there was a lot less oops than there was in Bath, which was pleasing. In fact, I don't think there was any oops as far as I'm aware. But there was a lot of blue-black. There was a lot of painter. There were the two of us plus Alex, our friend, and another guy called Andy, who was also on painter. Those are the two big chunks of the metagame. But yeah, a lot of blue-black. 5 copies at least of Tempo and a couple of Doomsday, and even a blue-black show and tell list, which sounds kind of wild. And yeah, that's what the sort of big picture was. A couple of copies of Forge, a couple of copies of Cradle, an Affinity deck, some Death and Taxes, an Energy player, Ruby Storm player, a Helm player. So kind of fairly similar, actually, to the online meta at the moment, I would say, having just looked at like the last set of challenge results.
Yeah. Aside from the oops.
Aside from the oops, yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, Dimir Blue-Black Tempo is the putative best deck in the format, and I think that is represented in terms of metagame share.
Yeah, I would agree. I think perhaps the only thing that really, other than the entire lack of oops, that really stands out is the 4 painter players. But I feel like there's a bit of a spike here in saying, oh, it's a new set of cards. I think 2 of the people playing are pretty dedicated painter players. Yourself and Andy seem to be painter mains, and then Alex and I have a few options that we would like to play on a regular basis. But I think it is a very good deck. I don't think it's quite actually getting the results that it deserves based on how good it is. But yeah, I'd say that's an outlier. Otherwise, yeah, lots of tempo, and then a sort of smattering of other creature decks, which I think is more what I would expect, and not too far off what we planned for. Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, my matchups, I played against Affinity, and then I played against Forge, and Forge is a pretty tough matchup. I would say Affinity should be pretty reasonable, but wasn't, and then against Helm, which should be an absolutely awful matchup, given that it has main deck Leyline, main deck Karn, and main deck Douthie.
That is awful. Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow I won that match 2-0. I guess it's just one of those inconsistent, like, non-blue decks where my opponent, Ibby, was very unfortunate. But I guess also they can draw the wrong half, right? If you go for a painter combo and they have Leyline, then it doesn't do anything, which is what happened in game 1, and then in game 2, actually the same thing. So it's like, if you're not, that's one of the nice things, as we've talked about the painter list. But overall, a really fun event. I think what took it down in the end?
According to the results, there was Dimir Tempo Doomsday player that won the event. Let's see if I can get the post up. Rob T, who I think was also the judge at the event, actually.
Rigged.
But very familiar face. Has been playing Legacy at events in the UK for a long time, I'm certain. So, yeah, cool to see, and cool deck. So, yeah.
Yeah. But even though the paper event didn't go quite as we would have hoped with the deck, you've been on a real tear with the deck online. The last few days, it feels like you're constantly just sending me, I just 5-0'd again. Oh, whoops, another 5-0. And I think did you back 3 back to back?
I trophied 3 leagues in a row. Yeah.
Which is crazy.
It's pretty fun. I trophied 3 leagues in a row, and I 5-2'd a challenge after starting 0-2. So that was,
a nice cumulative 22 win rate. 90% win rate there.
I think the deck is extremely good, and I'm surprised. I think Dimir is probably trickier than maybe expected. I think Orcish Bowmasters and Tamiyo and Wasteland are all just irritating and can break apart quite a lot of hands. So maybe I'm only winning that matchup 50 to 60% of the time or something, which, given how popular it is. But against decks that can't kill Goblin Welder, you just win on turn 2. Like, so often. It's just crazy how often you win on turn 2.
Because it looks like a 3-card combo, right? And you think, oh, that won't come up that often. But just the way that it plays out is so frequently, you just find yourself in a position to turn 2. And I think that has really helped with a lot of the worst matchups for Painter previously. You know, I mean, I had a match against Oops yesterday where, you know, I kept one piece of interaction and a turn 2, and they kept a slightly slower hand because it was a post-board game, and I think they must have just been assuming like, oh, I'll have a little bit of time, and it's like, no, you won't have any time.
Sorry, good game.
Yeah, yes. which is kind of wild, really. It's quite resilient as well.
I think I've played against Oops several times in this run of winning, and I feel much happier playing against it. Like, a single piece of graveyard hate, like a Tormod's Crypt or a Soulguide Lantern or a Mindbreak Trap or whatever, is kind of enough to buy you the one turn that you need, and they just die. Whereas before that wasn't enough. I've played against Doomsday twice, and across the 6 games, they cast turn 1 Doomsday every single game, and I won both matches.
That is a wild stat.
And on like 2 of the turns, they forced my turn 1 Grindstone or something, and then cast Doomsday, like type hands. Was just winning those games like, oh, I'm gonna, and that wasn't just with like Welder combo. It was like assembling. Sometimes it was that, but sometimes it was, oh, I'll blast your Underground Sea so you can't cast Oracle because I've counted your petals and your lands and your exile, stuff like that. But I think that is also possible because this deck, I mean, I'm playing it with 4 Lotus Petal, 2 Mox Opal in it, which feels like a lot of fast mana to me. And I'm not cutting it in those sorts of matchups, but yeah. I guess
similarly to you, I had a league where I played against Sneak and Show twice, Oops, the Epic Storm, and Doomsday, which is like a real murderer's row of like combo decks. And I've ended up 4-1 in that league and was pretty close to the trophy. And I think that would just never have been possible with the previous version of Painter unless you just ran super, super hot. It wasn't like I felt like obviously I was getting as lucky as one needs to get to win games of Magic, but it didn't feel like it was a sort of once in a lifetime run of fortune. It was really just like, I feel like you can compete on that level in a way, which is really fun, honestly.
Yeah, it feels like a huge shot in the arm for the deck. In many ways, the opening hands can play kind of like Cephalid Breakfast, but without the dependency on Cephalid Delusionist, right? Like, your Goblin Welder can die in the same way that Cephalid can, but instead of you just sort of being stuck there with the combo pieces that don't work with anything other than Cephalid, now that they've banned Nadu, you're just like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter, and I have all these other combo pieces, and they will all just combo a different way, or I'll make Urza Saga constructs that are enormous. Like, you can make Urza Saga constructs on turn 2, which are like 5/5, 6/6, and that happens not infrequently. So
yeah.
The infinite mana lines as well, turn 2, I think win a lot more than I was expecting, and part of that is a recent tweak I've made, which is I've started trying Tezzeret out, which is an outlet for your infinite mana that will win the game as well. So it's a kind of grindy engine piece that tutors combo pieces for both Painter Servant and Goblin Welder, and therefore is an outlet for your infinite mana, which I have liked a lot.
It's a nice way to look at it. Like, if it's a fair piece that, so you've replaced Fable with that, and it searches Suacam, obviously, as well as Grindstone, but perhaps slightly less obviously it searches Chromatic Star, which is then going to be a kill with Cam combo, and it finds you various silver bullet targets that you've started playing, like Pyrite Spellbomb, and you put the Soulguide Lantern back in the main deck, I think.
Yeah. Gets Skateboard.
Yeah, finds Skateboard for the infinite Richardson Port lines, infinite Tangle Wire.
But even just haste, even just Tezzeret grab Skateboard, like having 3 more copies of something to give your goblins haste when you draw them is really nice. I don't know if it's better than Fable. I would say it's certainly different. And I have also cut Defiler, I suppose, to make space for the third Tezzeret. I know that you've played it a little bit, and you might have liked it a little less than I have. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've only played, I think, 4 matches or so with it, and the thing that I was finding was that there were just hands where Tezzeret comes down and only you -3 it to get something that you need in the moment or that you think will come in handy for a future combo turn. Say you get like a cam, or you get, I don't know, a piece of mana or whatever it is. Well, you can untap often a Great Furnace, which is a nice line. It can untap a Weld, which is a nice line. But I feel like if you have the cards that are good to untap in play already, you're probably in good shape, like, say, Goblin Welder, Goblin Engineer. And then on its own, it's not presenting as much of a threat in terms of, like, without other pieces, because it only gets you the sort of less impactful halves of both combos. Like, Painter's Servant is better to have in play if you're playing Blasts than Grindstone is, and then Welder is obviously the much better half than Sewer Cam. Sewer Cam is good, but like Welder's Goblin Welder, so you know it does all the things with it. So for me, it's still an open question of, like, there's this 3 mana spell that you can cast and it doesn't do anything. You know, it doesn't present the power level that it feels like a sort of a synergistic piece with what you're doing rather than a kind of haymaker that you can slam. Whereas Fable obviously does have those synergies, but also, like, on rate, you're just getting much more board presence, say, if you're playing into creatures. So I think maybe it's just a slight playstyle adaptation, and I just need to figure out when and where the best places are to deploy Tezzeret within the list. But that's been my main concern with it, is that I just have hands where it's like, okay, I've got the choice between deploying a Goblin Engineer and deploying Tezzeret, and I'm feeling like I should probably be deploying the Engineer because it presents more, like, potential card advantage or threat of getting a kill, or, you know, finding a more impactful artifact that I can then get into place with it, rather than Tezzeret just finding, like, your baubles. I mean, not that you play any baubles, but...
No, I agree. Tezzeret has often been the last card I want to play in my hand.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And it's sort of a skeleton key for the situation you're in. That tends to be how I've been finding success with it. I don't know if I want 3 copies or 2 copies. So maybe I want 2.5, but that's not a thing. But it certainly does play differently to Fable, and it does change the deck construction. So I put Sudden Demise back in the sideboard. It reduces the pressure on, like, wanting to have things to copy, that sort of thing. And you're right, it is less of a direct pressure card in itself. Like, it's often tricky to get it to tick down again. Yeah. For example, like, you'll tick it to 1, you'll get an artifact, you might be able to get it up to 2, up to 3, and then you might cash it in. So it might be 3 mana double tutor sort of thing. Might be the usual case, I would say. But if they have a large board, you're just getting 1 tutor from it. But I would also argue that usually if they have a large board, then you're kind of late in the game. And often to protect it, I'm finding I just tutor for Cam.
Yeah.
And we'll tap down their threat to protect Tez. And then that will tick Tez up, and then I will untap, and you probably have 4 mana because you've played Tezzeret and Cam in the same turn, and then...
Yeah, I was going to say, that requires you to have 4 mana, which I guess, like, that's when it does get to that slightly later stage. I think my slight issue with it was, like, just having it in my openers and feeling like, oh, this card is, like, dead until, like, turn 4, probably.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I feel like I can afford that. Like, it doesn't have at all the same pattern of, like, okay, I can slam this on turn 1, like a Fable, and then, like, ride it to a winning line. So it's kind of a different vibe, and I think that's why I just need to play with it a bit more to have a more informed opinion on it, because obviously you after a couple of leagues were straight away like, I love it, it's great.
I love it because it plays the deck how I want to play it, probably more.
Interesting.
But it doesn't fulfill grindy games very much. It leans more into being combo focused, and you will win fewer games with just, I'm going to make stuff and copy it and attack you. That doesn't happen, really.
How do you feel like it impacts a matchup like blue-black, which I think is one that you mentioned earlier that you're not that keen on, and I think is an important one to address given that it is like a big chunk of the meta right now?
Yeah, I could definitely see it being worse, especially as I have like fewer blasts in this build, that sort of thing, and those are pretty critical versus blue-black. So I could see it certainly being worse there. I think, yeah, it's a much better, I would say, like a goldfish card, right? If I'm just playing against nobody, then it's really good.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, the jury's out. I think I'm going to keep playing with it because Fable, I think, is quite known, right?
Yeah.
I know that Fable is good, and I like the things that it does, and I like how it pushes games in a certain direction, right? You get the rebate on your Lotus Petal really quickly if you just jam it, and it will just take over the game. And that always feels great, just resolving the turn one Fable in a matchup where you know it's going to go a few turns.
Yeah.
You feel really favored. Whereas Tezzeret probably doesn't do that. I would say Tezzeret's just going to be much, much better in any matchup where they're unfair, right? I can go and get my Pithing Needle or my Soulbite Lantern or whatever on turn one if I have a fast mana start, that sort of thing. Or I can solve a combo hand more quickly.
No, I'm definitely going to continue trying it just out of, deck building curiosity, if nothing else, and because it's an interesting card. I think that this is a nice point to bring in a question that we had via a Spotify comment, which was nice to receive. So thank you to anyone that leaves comments. And indeed, I've had a few people get in touch with some really lovely feedback. So thank you for that. It really is lovely to hear that people are enjoying it. Makes our egos bigger.
Hurrah.
But so Daniel Antunes on Spotify commented, Fable is a must for me. It just increases the percentage of matches won against blue, black, and beans. Great episode. I just wanted you to comment on Karn, Mystic, and Big Mana. They've been rising quite a bit in the ratings. And I think that's interesting because that is something that I've seen as well. I've been playing a fair bit against the post deck with like 4 candelabras. There were, as we talked about earlier, some Forge and Post like players at the ELMQ, and it does seem to be a style of deck that is attractive to people. People want to play these big mana decks. And it is also interesting in the context of talking about Tezzeret, because one of my slight misgivings about playing Tezzeret in the list is that you don't leverage it as well when you're not playing like Grim Monolith and all these ways that you can generate value by untapping artifacts. Like obviously Grim Monolith into Tez, because it casts it straight away. Untapping your Grim Monolith is a super strong play pattern. So that's a little bit of a stumbling block for me to be like, okay, is Tezzeret going to be as good as it is in those decks? Maybe not. And maybe that doesn't matter because it's good in different ways in this deck. And that's fine. But yeah, I mean, do you want to talk a bit about Tron /Forge /Big Mana? How do you feel about the matchup? How do you feel about their position in the meta? What's the vibe?
Sure. I don't think it's a good matchup, is my first inclination.
I've been struggling with it a bit, I have to say.
Yeah, I think it's one of the more tough matchups to be playing. Entertainingly, the comment in question references Fable being a must. I think it's a matchup where Fable is pretty terrible, generally.
Yeah.
You just don't have time to be sculpting and sitting around. And it is a matchup where I think Tezzeret would be a lot better based on what we've just been talking about. Nevertheless, I would guess that the matchup is perhaps better than it was historically for Painted, because you now have ways to win through Karn, which maybe wasn't entirely reliable before, although maybe that's a wash. There are a lot of artifacts in this sort of build. Like, I'm still playing 4 Great Furnace, the Mox Opals, the Petals, and so on. So sometimes Karn is just lights out. I'm always bringing in my Abrades and my Disruptor Flute and my Lightning Bolts and my Pithing Needle. I think those are the cards that I'm thinking about bringing in, but they aren't the sorts of cards that massively swing the matchup, and you're really looking for proactive hands that will ask them to have specific disruption to answer, like whatever, a Dismember or something like that, or they need to have drawn their Pithing Needle to be able to race you. I think those are the games where you're going to do best. What do you think?
I think one of the big problem cards is Kozilek's Command, because it answers most of your combo lines. in terms of it can eat graveyard cards, it can eat welders, it can eat painters, it can just obviously net them loads of mana, find them there, high impact cards. I mean, Codex Command, just as a brief aside, is an absolutely egregiously badly designed Magic card. And if I had my way, I would see it gone just based on vibes. But that's not how that works. Obviously, it's not. I don't think it's reached a threshold of like bannable at this stage. But it does everything, and I think that is bad design. But anyway, I think that is one of the big problem cards in the matchup, and it does make me wonder how the best way is to attack the deck. If you're playing Painter / Welder Cam, I think that you might be tempted to like cut, say, some blasts because they don't have any blue spells, but that might also be. I mean, I have had some success in a list with more blasts that's more Painter focused, and this is prior to Welder Cam, of just like the game plan being get a Painter into play as soon as possible and just start blasting their payoff, because they can have as many candelabras as they like if you blast their One Ring, or you blast their Khan, or you blast their Codex Command. And so that's one thing, but I'm not sure that it's consistent enough as a game plan, particularly not now that we're playing many fewer blasts, and the card being so low impact without Painter is kind of problematic. So, you could look at cards like Blood Moon or Damping Sphere. Damping Sphere is a card I've never really been too high on, but maybe it's an option just to slow them down. I think the way I would try and approach it is that you want to get under them with the combo. You're never going to win the long game against like their like 10 mana plays, but you also need to try and get under them in such a way that their fairly limited interaction doesn't completely blow you out, like it can do if you go for an early combo line with Painter, say, and then you just get you lose to Codex Command, for example.
Yeah, I don't have as much else to add.
I mean, are you interested in Blood Moon, for example?
No. Nah. I think if people start playing this deck and if people start playing lands more, then I think having answers to your opponent's lands. So I think lands is quite tricky, actually. I've played against it a couple of times, and that has been difficult. I think that would make me more inclined to try and think of solutions for it. But yeah, for the moment, I think I'm happy to rely on speed and them not being very popular and see how that works out. I agree with your sentiments on Codex Command. It was nice once upon a time to have the cost of playing colorless mana be that you were limited on flexibility. And that is no longer the case. They were just like, why don't you just get all of the answers to everything in one card instead of having to play colors to unlock certain effects? So yeah, I share your frustration there. Yeah, I whilst colorless is rising in the metagame, I think there are also natural predators to it. Things like the Corey Steelcutter blue-red aggressive decks. I think those sorts of forged decks tend to have a difficult time with that. And we'll hopefully see it naturally ebb away again, I would guess.
I should think so. I think it spiked the challenge, this full candelabra list, the anti-paper.
Yeah, do you have money list?
Do you have money list? Obviously, we mostly play Proxy Legacy, but there are lots of non-Proxy Legacy scenes around the world, so that's relevant there. I think that, yeah, it's just one of those things where you can probably tech slightly towards beating it, and it's also a question of learning the variants, because you have to be quite careful. There are some variants that play Emrakul and some that don't, and obviously the ones that play Emrakul, if you go for a Painter combo line, you will lose, probably because you've invested mana and time into that plan, and then they just get to invalidate it by having an Emrakul in their deck. But then you also need to know if you're bringing in Needle and you're bringing in Disruptor Flute. I think Flute is actually really, really good here because it lets you be a bit more reactive, whereas Needle, like I've had games where I know I need to cast the Needle to try and hopefully turn off their payoff, whether it's Ring or Khan, and then you name the wrong one and then you lose.
I did have a fun game versus Forge post Khan stuff at this ELMQ where I had to make this decision where I actually went off but made infinite mana, but I didn't have any payoffs. So I just played a Fable. I actually had Fable to play. And then I had a Pithing Needle. And I was like, do I name Khan or do I name Ring? And it took me a little while to realize that it just didn't matter because you can just swap them out. You can swap out needle for cam and then cam for needle and rename whatever they actually cast, which was a really neat trick for those who are waiting. Yeah,
that's very, very cool. Yeah. So that's some thoughts on that matchup. I mean, you mentioned a Corey Steel Cutter in the context of like the blue-red cutter list, but I also just wanted to shout out the very cool Corey Steel Cutter welder cam list that Callum has trophied with, which is a very interesting take on the cam combo. So go and check that list out if you want to look at something slightly different. And then maybe just like closing thoughts. We had a banned and restricted announcement as of time of recording yesterday, and there were no changes in any format except for
historic. Because specifically fuck food chain, I think is the message. Literally though, the page is like standard, no changes. Pioneer, no changes. No changes. No changes. No changes. No changes. No changes. Historic food chain is banned, which I thought was just hilarious the way that that presented.
It's very funny. How do you feel about legacy no changes?
Yeah, I don't like that at all. I think I feel like we're not in the fire as a format, but we're definitely still in the frying pan. And I'd quite like to get, back onto the counter and have things be relaxed again. But it really, I usually try and give to people of Wizards of the Coast the respect they deserve. Like I would like to believe that they think about these formats, and they definitely claim they do. But the update here is all about, look, Death and Taxes won a challenge. Did they win? Yes, they won.
Yeah.
A showcase challenge. And that's fine. That's one tiny data point in a whole sea of information that they are just disregarding about what cards see what play rate and so on. They're saying things like, we've seen Oops All Spells fall off a bit. I think that Oops is the most winning deck of challenges in the last however many weeks. I think it has won the most challenges of any single deck. I think it's saying the format's top dog in Dimir Tempo has come down in metagame share and win rate. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's true?
I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like this text is written by someone that has played the format. And I don't know. I don't have the full picture of data that presumably Wizards do have, but it doesn't feel like they're representing the data that they have in a very, what's the opposite of disingenuous? Ingenuous way. It feels a little bit like they're just picking and choosing, as you said, a couple of random points to make, I mean, the text that reads, we're elated to see games decompress in Legacy as they become fairer. One of the more observable symptoms of that decompression is that Swords to Plowshares has started to be a more reasonable part of the format at large. I mean, it's like, I don't really know what that means in terms of like, Death and Taxes winning one challenge doesn't mean that all of the matches that you play against Oops are fun. Like, that's not, those two things don't really intermingle. And I don't have the stats. I don't know whether Oops is the most winning challenge deck. I don't know whether Dimir Tempo is the most winning challenge deck. But
I was watching Crucible of Words channel.
Cyrus.
Cyrus did an update on, and he's been logging on his social media the performance of every archetype. And I believe that he said that. And I fully trust his assessment because it's a big part of what he does. So yeah,
fair enough. I mean, and I don't mean or want to harp on about Oops All Spells because it can become just tedious to just keep making the same points. But I would just really like it if, and I like the fact that we are getting like some text accompanying these no changes statements. But I would love that text to be a little bit more rigorously constructed and feel less like it's been like jotted off in the margins. And I don't mean that to sound like disrespectful. It just, from the reaction that I'm seeing, like in the Legacy player communities that I'm in, nobody is very convinced by this statement, and nobody really feels, even if they don't feel like they want anything about the format to change, and that's a very valid position to take. You don't have to think they need to be bans, but you can still feel like Legacy decisions are not being made by people who are super engaged with Legacy. And I think that's a bit of a shame for the format overall. And I would like to see some changes. I think that like Tamiyo is like very clearly an egregious Magic card that is probably going to have to at some point be the next card to be banned in that long line of like blue card advantage engines that blue decks can play. Psychic Frog being the last one to go.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think Legacy is in a bad place. I have to say, I sort of caveat all of that with like, Legacy is definitely better than it has been. And I think that we are seeing some much more natural like metagame ebb and flow, I suppose, between like Oops, where Oops comes, like rises up and then people put adequate amount of Graveyard Hate into their sideboards and then, or Oops Hate into their sideboards and then it goes down again. I don't think that ebb and flow on its own is enough to make a healthy format. And I think I would like to see a little bit more active curation of the gameplay experience of the format, because I think I would say the quote that I read out, at least they are saying that they want to see Legacy become a bit fairer. That's a step in the right direction for me. So, I guess we'll see. I don't know when the next banner restriction announcement is, but yeah.
I think it's in May. Doesn't say on here anymore. They're not saying this is when the next one is, but I did look at a list of them. I find the statement about Source of Plowshares being popular hilarious. It's like, best removal spell of all time playable in format where people do play creatures. Next
Shocker.
On the news, like come on, that's just not a useful sentence to write. It does say that Legacy hasn't reached a solve end state, and I kind of agree in that even just now we were talking about post rising, and maybe there'll be Cutter coming in to push it down again. So we're not in a static format. I disagree that they're saying that Oops and Dimir are less winning than they were. And I feel like they're just saying that because of optics, basically. And that's frustrating. The point you made about Tamiyo, where you think it's the next card that has to be banned, I don't think it's particularly close. And I think it could have been banned a year ago. And I think it's the number one card that leads to frustrating gameplay, where your opponent can just make all their decisions based on, I get to continue snowballing after I've resolved my one drop, which is miserable, including I'll just keep wastelanding you after I flip my Tamiyo and you don't get to play the game, or whatever. And there's just no good reason for it to continue existing, as far as I can tell. Like what is it promoting or providing other than...
Well, it makes Brainstorm better, and that card really needed help, so...
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. People were cooling off on Brainstorm, so we thought, why don't we print this cracked Planeswalker that requires you to cast Brainstorm? Yeah, I don't know. It's more playable than it was. It's not as good as it could be, and that seems pretty obvious to me. So, yeah.
I think it'd be nice if they took player sentiment into account a bit more, and I think if they could be a bit more transparent about, like, when they say things like, the data suggests that Oops is less winning than it was. Can we see that or any kind of indication about that? Because like the data that the community collects, like you described it, is not backing you up. So it just feels like we're being gaslit a little bit on that front.
Yeah.
And that's not it just doesn't, I think my issue with that is it doesn't build confidence in a format. Like when you have a format that gets the right amount of attention, that in itself engenders support for that format and people wanting to play it and so on. And when it's like, oh, we don't know if they're going to take the right path of Legacy, that's sort of risky in the bigger picture sense for a format. So I just think that, obviously it costs time and money to do these things, but you're already making, I don't know how much off all these secret layers. So
anyway. If I could just turn on a printer and make money, which is what they do, then you might want to invest, 20% more time into maintaining the ecosystem that means you can make money. But,
seems reasonable.
There's a reason that I'm not CEO of Hasbro.
No, you're a decent person. So,
well, that's also debatable, but we can.
I will maintain that.
Okay.
Any closing thoughts? Anything that you'd like to end on?
I think we've been seeing lots of movement in people listening to the podcast. I just want to say thank you. It's really exciting to see people picking this up and sharing it with their friends and talking about it. And we're getting feedback on it. I know Jasper mentioned it briefly, but I just wanted to echo his thoughts that that's really cool and it means a lot. Right.
100%.
So thank you for listening.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 8 of Eternal Horizons. As Francis said, thanks very much for listening. Please do follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts, and leave us a comment or a rating if you're so inclined. Tell us what you think of the banned and restricted announcement. Tell us what you think of Paparazzi Painter. Tell us whether you've ever played Old School. I would love to hear people. I'm sure there are some great tournament stories with Old School. I mean, like, as a scene, it must be so. In any case, that's it for us. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Goodbye.